Sanctions are functioning. They're not just against Russia. Defining sanctions and their purpose. Most people think of sanctions as a punishment, but they can also be used as a tool to encourage a change in behavior. Sanctions are usually economic, but can also include things like travel bans or arms embargoes. The purpose of sanctions is to put pressure on a country or organization to change their policies or behavior. They are often used as an alternative to military force and can be very effective when applied correctly. Sanctions typically have three goals: changing the behavior of the target, signaling disapproval of the target's actions, and punishing the target. They are most likely to succeed when they are multilateral, imposed by many countries at once, well-targeted, specifically targeting those who are responsible for the problem, and accompanied by diplomatic engagement to provide an off-ramp for the target to avoid further sanctions. The efficacy of sanctions against Russia in 2022. In 2022, it will be 5 years since the United States and European Union first imposed sanctions on Russia in response to its annexation of Crimea. The sanctions have been renewed and expanded several times since then, most recently in 2019 in response to Russia's continued aggression in Ukraine. Despite predictions that the sanctions would cause economic collapse in Russia, they have not had their intended effect. While the Russian economy has certainly slowed down since 2014, it has not collapsed. In fact, according to some measures, it has begun to recover in recent years. So why haven't the sanctions worked? There are a number of reasons. First, Russia is a large and diversified economy, so it is not as susceptible to economic shocks as smaller economies are. Second, China has been increasingly investing in Russia since the sanctions were imposed, helping to offset any lost Western investment. Third, the sanctions have been relatively easy to circumvent. Russia has used loopholes in the sanctions to import various goods without much difficulty. In addition, a number of European countries have continued to do business with Russia despite the sanctions. The 2014 Crimean crisis led to the introduction of sanctions targeting Crimea and Sevastopol. These sanctions have been extended every year since then. They were broadened in September 2015 to include a number of Russian officials, companies, and public figures. In response to Russia's military intervention in Ukraine, the US and EU imposed sanctions on Russian individuals and companies. These included asset freezes and travel bans. In addition, the EU has imposed restrictive measures against Crimea and Sevastopol. All EU member states are required to follow these restrictive measures in all areas of economic activity. These measures are in place until June 23. In September 2014, the EU imposed restrictive measures against Russia following its military intervention in Ukraine and annexation of Crimea. These measures are in place until March 15. The EU has also imposed restrictive measures against Crimea and Sevastopol. All EU member states are required to follow these restrictive measures in all areas of economic activity. These measures are in place until June 23. The renewal of the EU sanctions against Russia is subject to a political assessment, which takes into account developments in Ukraine and Russia. The European Commission will continue its work under the Support Group for Ukraine to help Ukraine achieve economic and financial stability. The European Commission and the European External Action Service are in close contact with the Ukrainian authorities, international financial institutions, and other international organizations to support implementation of the association agreement. The European Union will continue to assist Ukraine in preparing for further reforms. Why sanctions against Russia are not working in 2022? In recent years, sanctions have become a popular tool for the United States to achieve its foreign policy goals. Sanctions are seen as a way to punish countries that do not comply with U.S. demands without resorting to military force. However, critics of sanctions argue that they are ineffective and often cause more harm than good. Despite these criticisms, there is evidence that sanctions can be effective if they are designed and implemented correctly. The most notable example of successful sanctions is the case of South Africa. The United States first began using sanctions as a foreign policy tool in 1979, when the Carter administration placed an embargo on Iran in response to the taking of 52 Americans hostages at the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. The United States has since imposed sanctions on other countries, including Cuba, Iran, Iraq, Libya, and Sudan. The U.S. State Department states that sanctions are the most frequently used diplomatic tool of the United States. Sanctions can be used as a tool to achieve many different goals. They are often aimed at governments, but individuals or corporations may also be targeted depending on the circumstances and the sanctioning body's goals. The stated goal of sanctions is to alter the behavior of the target government, but the impact and effectiveness of sanctions is often debated. In addition, many states and other entities have been accused of abusing their power to impose sanctions for a variety of reasons. The State Department says that sanctions are a sign of the United States' deep commitment to advancing democracy and human rights. We believe that sanctions can be an effective tool for changing the behavior of governments and can serve as a powerful reminder about the costs of authoritarian rule. The potential impact of continued sanctions in 2022. In 2022, the potential impact of continued sanctions will be felt more acutely by the Russian government and population. The Russian economy has been in recession since 2015, largely due to Western sanctions imposed over the past 4 years. These sanctions have restricted Russia's access to international financial markets, limited its ability to import Western technology and expertise, and caused a significant decline in foreign investment. The Russian government has responded to these challenges by increasing its spending on domestic industry and agriculture, but this has not been enough to offset the negative effects of the sanctions. As a result, living standards in Russia have declined sharply, with real wages falling by more than 10% since 2014. Poverty rates have also increased, with over 20 million Russians now living below the poverty line. The continued imposition of sanctions is likely to exacerbate these trends in 2022. Looking for alternative solutions in 2022 for Europe. In conclusion, it is evident that sanctions are not solely directed at Russia. Europe has also been significantly impacted. However, in the face of an increasingly complex global economic system, it is important to explore alternative solutions for Europe in 2022. One potential solution is for Europe to focus on developing its own internal market. This would allow European countries to become more self-sufficient and less reliant on trade with other regions. Alternatively, Europe could seek to strengthen its relationships with other trading partners, such as China or India. Ultimately, the decision of what direction to take must be made by European leaders. However, it is clear that there are a number of potential options available, and that sanctions alone are not enough to address the challenges facing Europe today. Thank you for watching Nonsense YouTube channel. Please do subscribe for more videos.